Welcome to Longterm. I'm Ty King, and this podcast where we're discovering recovery, right? It's something that people live with. They come out of these lived experiences of some stories that are kind of unimaginable, even from like a Hollywood story sort of stance. Just this past week, we've recorded several where I'm sort of sitting in there enthralled and listening to the lives of these people and what they've come out of and thinking, wow, I thought I knew everything about, what it's like to live in a life full of addiction. You've seen plenty of TV shows. We've seen NCIS. We've seen those types of shows before, right? But it's a little bit wilder than that and a little bit more real because these people are close to home. They work with you. They are driving in the cars around you, and they live life. And like your life is much better whenever they go through a successful recovery. And so that's what these stories about. It's us trying to understand what is recovery about and how do we all benefit whenever somebody goes through a successful recovery versus when they don't. And in this world, I've learned that it is its own sort of micro world when you enter recovery because they have their own set of conferences. And I've been to lots of those. I've been to lots of the behavioral health ones. I've been to the ones that are specifically recovery. And then those can get divided up by different other categories like faith conferences or scientific based conferences or medicine based. And there's so many different directions to it. And the rabbit hole is deep. That's why we continuously have to keep doing these episodes and talking to more people. But part of that is that the recovery world also has its own media giants, right? And so when we think about getting the news or we're thinking about, consumers or influencers that we listen to or watch on YouTube, the recovery realm also has that, and it kind of has a different. And I hope to get into this, but I think it has a lot different connotation and a lot different stakes whenever you're in recovery and you're watching other people who have been through recovery and they're talking about it, right? And they're having those conversations because you kind of have to have that motivation. You need to learn more about the things that you don't know and how to deal with those, and so. Amber Hollingsworth is one of those macro influencers in that whole world of recovery. And she hosts the show, Put the Shovel Down. And Amber, so thank you so much for being on the show and to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ty. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so you're located in South Carolina. Is that correct?
That's right. Can you tell by my accent?
No, not at all.
Most people can.
No, I was you're in New Jersey. I was joshing. Yeah, you can definitely tell you're from South Carolina. Yeah. I don't know if you can hear the Arkansas in my voice, but I
I
spent a lot
can.
of years. Good, I'm good. I spent a lot of years because I did not like that Southern accent. Just studying movies, and I would just copy the actors' like words, their dialogue, and I would just try to repeat it exactly like they did over and over and over and over and over as a kid until I washed the Southern out to where I had this like bland Midwestern whatever it is I have now. So you've got character with your voice. You
Yeah,
embraced
I
it.
couldn't quite overcome it, so I just decided just to lean in, just to roll with it. That's all I got.
Absolutely. And it's served you well. I mean, you've got this channel. I mean, you've almost got up to a million subscribers on YouTube alone. And your podcast is also distributed across all podcast platforms. And so I'd love to hear your story. How it got to that point. How did you even become like an influencer in that whole realm?
Well, that's usually the first question I get asked is how did I get into the field usually? And I landed
Right.
here sort of by accident, whereas most people land here by choice. I just accidentally ended up here. Um, I Basically, I was gonna go be a school counselor, and I couldn't afford to intern for a whole year, and, like, because I was a teacher at the time, I couldn't afford to take a year off work. So I changed my major at the last minute so that I could intern in the summer, and they threw me in an addiction program. And then from there, I'm here. Now I came from an addicted family, like, very, like, severe addiction all over the place. So I have lived it, but it's not how I got in the field. I just accidentally got here. I do think that having that family background is important to my story, but it's just not the reason that I got here. I got here by accident and got thrown in the middle of the deep end, and man, it was sink or swim.
What do you mean by that? How was it an accident? And how were you just thrown out there?
Well, because I didn't get into the field of addiction on purpose. I originally went to college to be a school teacher. I taught high school for a few years. That was like really hard. That was terrible. And then I went back to get a counseling degree. Naturally, because I was in the school system, I thought, well, I'll just be a school counselor. That just seemed like the natural step. And like I said, I couldn't afford to take off a whole year to intern as a school counselor, like, and be gone from teaching for a year. So I changed my major the very last second, got thrown into an internship over the summer since I was out in the summer I was teaching. Um, and they threw me in an addiction program. And because I had been a school teacher teaching high school before that, and I had interned, for, 5 minutes or something in some kind of addiction adult program, they thought the place that hired me, which was the place I interned, they thought, oh, she's taught teenagers before. We want an addiction teenager program at this facility that I worked at. You go do that, Amber. And they literally tasked me with like designing and running this program. And I had no idea what I was doing, like way over my head. Addicted teenagers, you couldn't get in any deeper water than that. And that's
Oh
where
my
they put me.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Regular teenagers are bad enough, and then
I know,
addicted
right?
teenagers, yes, yeah, that's a
Right.
really bad combination. So you yourself don't have any lived experience as far as being addicted or using substances?
Not as far as being addicted to substances. I grew up in it, and because of that, it never looked very appealing to me. You know how they say when you grow up in it, you either go all the way the
Yeah.
opposite or
Oh
all the way
yeah.
in? I'm kinda one of those all the way the opposite because it's
Right.
just it didn't look very glamorous to me. Um, so I don't have it in that way, but I will say, like, as far as, like, the genetics of it, I for sure have it because 'cause I'm definitely one of those people that's, like, addictive personality. It's like everything is extreme. I don't do anything a
Oh, yeah.
little bit. And
Same
so
here.
I know I have it in there. I just haven't tempted it yet with the substances. I have with other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely relate to that story. My father was an avid alcoholic, and if there wasn't money for anything else, there was always money for alcohol, and so that's how you knew he was awake whenever you heard a beer crack open. But yeah, it never looked very glamorous to me as well. Tried, experimented, and did all this stuff when you're young, just like you do when you're out there on your own for the first time, but like nothing ever stuck. And never tried the hard drugs because of that very thing you were just saying. Like you see the results of it, and you're like, that just doesn't appeal to me. Losing teeth and the
When you
lifestyle
see
you're
the
living.
the real end stage of it, it's not exciting. It's not tempting the
Yeah,
same way I think as if you hadn't lived
not
it.
at all. No.
Mm-mm.
Great. So you're coming at this from an educational point of view, then, as an educator, and teaching about it. So how did that lead into doing these online, instructional videos? This is you've been doing this. I mean, your earliest video I could find on YouTube was 9 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I worked in uh, a facility, which was an inpatient and intensive outpatient programs for like 10 years. And then eventually, I mean, I did everything. I ran that teenager program for years and years. I worked in adult detox. They had mental health. I've done it all. And then I decided to leave and start my own private practice. So about 10 years in, I did that. And then it got to the point where I would hear all the time people would say, man, I just wish, Amber, I wish I had that on recording so I could just play that back for myself. Because I would find I would say the same like 15 things, over and over and over. People say that. And then I thought, well, I guess I could record it. And so I just recorded some of the lessons or the conversations that I had over and over, like, the brain stuff and all that other stuff. And threw it on YouTube just as a place for people like my clients could watch it. I wasn't in the YouTube game at the time. I just was like recording some of the so I didn't have to
Yeah.
say it 50 times. But then
Right.
that turned into its own thing, and then I got into the YouTube game, and like I said before, I have, like, addictive personality, so I got obsessed about
All
it,
in. Yeah.
and that's how we got here. That's the short story of how we got here.
That's incredible. So did you see like a pretty steep like climb in attention whenever you started putting the videos up? I know you're putting them out there for very specific few people, but then I guess they caught the public attention.
No, it took a long time to get any traction on YouTube. YouTube is the hardest thing I've ever done. Getting people off drugs and alcohol is pretty straightforward, to be honest.
Yeah.
YouTube is rocket. I mean, you have to have
That's
so many skills, it's not even funny. So, it took a long, 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 long time to get to 100, and then you're not even in the game until you have 1,000. It took me years to get to 1,000, like,
yeah.
I would just be calling up my friends and family, just be like, "Just play my videos in the background. You don't even have to listen to them, but it helps the algorithm. I
Just
don't
loop it.
care. Just
Yeah.
play it. Just put on mute." I did everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We just crossed, what was it? 1,000. So it took about a year to get to our first 1,000. That was a few months ago. And then we got our second 1,000 within like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
And I was
it
like, you
gets
know how
momentum,
hard we
yeah.
had to work for get that, that first thousand.
I
And the second one was
know.
just like, we didn't even have to work for it anymore. Now we're up to 2,500, but just as of today, which is great. So there's definitely an audience out there, and I try to look in the analytics as much as I possibly can of our channel. I don't know how much you get into that. But trying to figure out, okay, well, who's actually watching these videos and who's trying to learn, who is going across the board of all the different platforms that we have, because we use Megaphone and Spotify for our podcast hosts. And anyway, so they capture their own analytics on each platform or program. And so I try to gather it all together and try to get a demographic of like, okay, who's the general person that's listening to this? And what we found is that it's not people that are in recovery. It's people that don't have any connection to recovery, and they weren't necessarily looking to learn about it. It just happened to cross their feed and they became curious, and now they subscribed and they stick with the show and like they're interested, which is great because that's what we want, is for more people, more normies, as they call us, to be interested, because the more people that we have that are more knowledgeable on the successes of recovery, and how that benefits, I think the better resources we'll have available for more people to have addiction, which gives us more prevention, intervention, and justice reform at the end of the day. So, your topics are really, really interesting too, because you cover a few things, and coming from it, now that I know that you're coming at this from the educator point of view, it makes a lot of sense because you're saying some things that I've never heard of before. Like if you are married to someone who has an addiction problem, right?
Mhm.
I watched your video where you're talking about, how lots of times spouses will say, I'm going to take the kids away from you if you drink again, or I'm going to, do this, or we're going to leave. And for them to see that as a punishment,
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily stop the behavior because it's a negative, right? You're putting a negative connotation on the relationship.
Right.
Um, you come from so many different angles. I'd love to hear how do you study these subjects? How do you become knowledgeable on that, I guess is what I'm saying, without living it firsthand.
Well, I when I was a baby counselor is what I like to call it, when I was first in this field, I was really quite insecure about the fact that I wasn't in recovery because everyone else who's in the field is in recovery. I got no
Right.
cool war stories. I don't even have a cool tattoo or piercing. Like I like don't have anything. No street credibility whatsoever. I didn't have any of that. So when I was working with these teenagers, I didn't want anybody to know I didn't know what I was doing, especially my bosses. I was just like my first job out of grad school or whatever. And so I thought, well, I just got to get these teenagers just to show up and come every week, which let me tell you is not easy because get addicted teenagers to come sit in a room with you for 3 hours at a time, 3 hours a week. I mean, 3 times a week.
Yeah, that's tough.
Oh, that's no easy feat. So
No.
my first goal was how do I get them to show up? And so I focused all my efforts on building a relationship with them. I did learn that from being a school teacher, that it's about the relationship, that you can't get someone to do something because you're the boss, because you know better, because you have any power over them. But you can you can have influence over someone if you have a good relationship with. So I focused on that with these teenagers. And I feel like because I'm not in recovery, I listen better. Because a lot of people in the field are in recovery and they project their stories quite easily. Because one of the things I've done a lot of is supervise other new counselors. And it's very easy when you have your own story to just look at everybody else through your lens and not really hear what people are saying. So because I didn't have a story to look through that lens, I listen closely and I pay a lot of attention to what people are telling me, how they're thinking about it, why they're thinking about it that way, like a lot about the psychology of it. And so I feel like in the end, it's been a gift that I'm not in recovery, but it has been a hard road. I feel like I've had to work about 10 times harder to really understand it and get it and to build any kind of credibility, because most of the people that come see me, they don't want to come to see me when they get in the room. And so building credibility with someone like that is no easy feat.
Building trust, because that's a very vulnerable state to put yourself in, because there's still the stigma in society about talking about if you've ever had an addiction problem or substance use issues. And so you just want to go on, you want to build your career up, you don't want to have to tick that box when you're turning your resume saying, hey, have you ever been convicted of a felony charge or any of those types of things? A lot of
Yeah,
them
like
never have.
especially if you have a license, like a medical license, um, a lawyer, a doctor, you have to
Yeah,
check off that to renew your license every renewal
right.
cycle, and that's scary for people.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
putting themselves at risk. And so for you to build up that trust is incredible. How have you done that? Like, I know you put in a lot of work, but what goes into that for you? Are you just trying to get yourself down on their level and try to meet on common ground? Because that's something that we've been trying to do on this show for a long time, and that's what we've sort of found is the Venn diagram, where it's not, even if you don't have connection to substance use, right? There's sort of an overlap of where did this come from that they decided to do substances in the first place? You know what I mean? What
Right.
led to that decision? And it's usually some sort of trauma or something that they went through. There's some, lack of structure, whatever it is, or not feeling like they're being invested in. And I think we all are sort of recovering from something that is similar. And so there is that overlap, and that's kind of the common ground that we've sort of found between us, quote unquote, normies and people that have, that experience. What has it been for for you?
For me, the way I do that is just to focus on aligning with the person. I feel like most people when they first come, they're expecting you to be like the principal, like it to be like a principal's office visit. And so right out the gate, I have to like be the opposite. I'm there to be on their side. In fact, I say, I'm like your lawyer. It is my job to dig you out of any mess that you're in. I'm your girl. I'm on your side. And because I have these fancy letters after my name, I have credibility and people listen to me. I got your back. And so they're like, "Really?" They don't expect that. So I, like, align with them. And then I just focus on understanding them uniquely as a person. I mean, addiction is addiction, honestly, like, you could tell that story 100 times, but every person that has it is very different. And so I know how, if someone says I have a problem with alcohol, I could literally write the script. They don't have to tell me that. What I wanna know is who they are because that is how I pull them out of it, is I reach in, I listen to who they are, I find their values, what matters to them, what their motivations are, and I sort of harvest it out. And you can only do that by really listening to people.
Exactly right. And like I said, everybody is different. Like the stories can be similar enough. But it's, we've had this conversation a lot. We're talking about how, addiction doesn't discriminate, right? Who you are. And so if I think of, okay, think of an addict. If I tell you to do that and you're the average person, you're probably thinking of somebody that looks like they're tattooed, skinny, they're on Skid Row in California, right?
Right.
They don't think of the soccer moms that get addicted to some sort of pain medication, or
Right.
doctors that are self subscribing, or there's attorneys that are doing. There's all, it's all walks of life, all people, and it doesn't really discriminate. And
That's right.
okay, I can relate to you where you're saying like you grew up in a family that were addicts. You know what I mean? And I've spoken to plenty of people in emergency medicine that have talked about that there is a trait where I, a likelihood I could have become an addict as well. You know what I mean? Because they were. It gets passed down in a genetic sense, and so luckily never did that. But yeah, I love that you're doing that, and it's incredible work. And so we need more of you. I'll just say that much. We need more of you across the country. This is too rare of a thing, and you're in South Carolina. So your practice, do you take in clients from all over, or is it just locally to you in your location?
Initially, we were kind of a standard outpatient addiction specialist practice, and we had just outpatient counseling. We do run a family model, and we ran intensive outpatient programs. But after the YouTube started taking off, people are
Yeah.
calling us from all over the world. And so we don't do traditional counseling anymore. A lot of what we do these days is consultation specifically for
Nice.
family members because a lot of my YouTube content is how do you get through to someone who's in denial or who needs to get help but refuses to get help. That's all these years of talking to people who didn't want to see me, I've developed like really good skills at that. And so now I do a lot of teaching family members. How do I do that? I have a loved one who needs help, but they don't think they have a problem or they think they can fix it themselves or, regular stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of, so like your channel itself, the name, I was just thinking about that and how a lot of, recovery centered either media or programs or anything, those have like a pathway to hope or, it's always something like that, right? What does put the shovel down mean?
Put the shovel down means it's an old recovery saying. that means you hit your bottom when you put your shovel down. And for me, my mission is to try to get people out of this before they lose everything, before they hit bottom. Because the whole waiting for bottom is ridiculous. It's not only bad advice, it's dangerous. and and it just doesn't work. Or at least it doesn't work consistently enough to wait for that. And so our goal is to help people see it, conquer it before they're in those final stages of it. A lot of the people that we see these days are like the ones you were talking about. We see a lot of doctors, lawyers, business people, sometimes college students, but very successful in their life otherwise, but are quickly trending in the wrong direction. And so our job is just sort of dig them out of that mess before it goes any further.
That's incredible. I've never heard that before. And that's impactful. Um, Great. So the way that I mean, you're speaking from real experience. This is what is blowing my mind because now you're not only running your practice, but you're also using that information to give more information freely out to the public on YouTube, on your channel, for people to be able to deal with that. And so why specifically, why specifically help and consult with the family members? Why is that very important?
Well, number one, they're the ones that are looking for help. They're the ones that are desperate. And everywhere they go, they just get told some kind of version of, well, you have to just sort of back away from them and hope they figure it out and they got to want it for themselves. And at best, you get to like go to Al Anon, which is kind of insulting sometimes. I'm a fan of Al Anon, but people are like, I'm not the one that has a problem. They don't like to hear that. And so they're just being turned away left and right. And when this is your spouse or your child or someone that you really love and care about, that's not acceptable. And there are things you can do. And the reason I know that is because I've been working with people who didn't want help for my whole 20 something years. And if I can do it and I'm not in recovery, it's not that hard. I could teach you to do it. Plus, the family's the one that has all the influence. They hold all the cards. They just don't know how to play the cards they have. So that's what I teach them to do.
Absolutely. And lately we've been looking at, how it does impact the family, right? Because it's not just the addict or person that's on a substance that it affects, right? It's the pull, like it's the throw a stone in the lake and there's a ripple effect. And so it
Mm-hmm.
affects them, which affects everybody that they're associated with, and so like there's definitely a trickle down effect of how one person's actions can sort of, resonate across the field in a community or state, whatever. And it's I don't know if the person who needs recovery is aware of it, while they're in addiction. And lots of times, I've spoken to different like parental groups that specifically help, for recovery for the parents. Talking about how a lot of them sort of just blame themselves, for the child's actions or their spouse, you know what I mean, is addiction and don't know how to take that on. And like, how do I address this without feeling like I'm the failure in what's happening here?
Right. I mean, I feel like, and like I said, I see a lot of really functional people. I've seen a lot of kids over the years who came from very good households. So I can promise you it's not a product of parenting necessarily. If you
Yeah.
could make an addict, I would be one. Okay. I promise. So that's not the way that it works. But you can have influence over someone. And one of the things I've learned over and over and over is families, they have all this influence. But to be honest with you, they're blowing it. They're doing the opposite of everything they need to be doing, and the reason I know that is because I'm dealing with their loved one who's telling me that day after day after day after day. In fact, it's all they'll talk to me about is how my mom won't stop doing this, how my husband, blah, 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 how my wife. I mean, you can't get them to talk about addiction as long as the family is doing what I call playing the villain role.
So, I mean, honestly, that's a big change for someone to make whenever they are, when you're addicted, right? And so it's gets called, and I think it's even, what technically in the handbook of of diseases, right? Of being addicted. And for someone to come out of that into make recovery, they have to make that decision on their own. We've come across that all the time that they have to make that decision. Hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. But then that's the uphill climb of a lot of different things have to happen in order for that to happen. What do you recommend whenever somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I just started recovering and I don't know where to start"?
Well, I don't know that I have a blanket statement for that. I would just wanna know a lot more about that person. I wish I had a blanket answer. Where do I start? I mean, I could throw some things out there, like I could say, "Go to a meeting," or
No, we're
something,
looking
but
from
that's
your real
super generic.
expertise, and so
That's
that's yeah,
super
that's
generic,
right
like
on brand. If you're telling me that it's not a one size fits all sort of fix, right? Okay, so
I would say, why did you get sober? Like, why did you choose to do that? That's the place I would start because just getting them to talk about it reaffirms what they're doing. So they don't realize it, but the process of telling me that is actually what's working on them. It's not me hearing the answer, it's them saying the answer that has the
yeah,
effect. So I get them to talk about it more and more. What led you to that? Well, why is that important? And so as they're telling me that, they're strengthening their commitment to recovery.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it seems like it sounds a thing where it's like I don't know affirmation through questions. You know what I mean,
Mhm.
you are yeah. You're working out the reasoning in their own mind by giving you answers that way, and which is setting them on more solid ground to build up for
Right.
their future. Um, so I imagine that you've done a lot of work with people in recovery, and you've seen the results of that as well, because what they struggle with, right? It's not just the societal pressure, it's not just family pressures or your job or whatever it is, or the potential for relapse or any of that. There's also the legal implications. There are policies that are in place. They've got to follow these certain guidelines and everything. Um, what is something that you haven't covered yet for the channel? Has there been anything that you haven't really tried to approach yet that you would like to have covered, or you would like to have more people be aware of in recovery?
Gosh, I don't know if I can think of something. If I know about it, I've approached it. There's like more than 1,000 videos on the channel. So, I'm not holding back. Everything I know
Yeah,
is out there, and we really look at it from every angle, from the person with the addictions perspective, from the family member's perspective. It's really a lot about the psychology of it, because you can and I do some teaching on the brain science of it, which I think is important to understand, but it's really the psychology that you have to break through. Like, for example, when I said I would start by asking someone why they wanted to get sober, what family members are doing wrong is that they're putting a person in a position to defend the opposite of that. When you're trying to convince someone that they're an alcoholic, per se, their natural reflex immediately, like they can't even help it, we're all like this, is they're gonna start telling you why you're wrong. And you never, ever wanna put someone in a position to think the opposite of what you want them to think, or definitely not to say it. Because as they're saying that to you, they're convincing themselves otherwise. So it's just about understanding, like, how you position the conversations and how you pull it out of them rather than trying to push the information into them.
yeah, that's really insightful, and there's so much information, so much to learn. Like we said, we've done this show for almost 2 years now, and still constantly being in the field, constantly going to events, constantly listening to stories and other people, but there's always so much more to learn. And I can only imagine what it's like for someone, if it is your spouse or your child or your parent, all of a sudden that person that you love, like if you find out they've had an addiction problem for a long time, you know what I mean? And now you're thrown into this world of what do I do? My
Oh,
only
yeah.
touchstone is TV movies. Um, what do you recommend for those people that find themselves in that situation? Where can they start to even start learning about how to deal with the situation? I assume, because what you said earlier is you kind of have to start with yourself, right? You kind of have to um,
I think you have to educate yourself on what you're dealing with, because the universal laws that work in the regular world do not work in addiction. So it's almost like there's no more gravity. Because the reason I say that is because addiction messes with the motivation centers of someone's brain. And those are the laws that guide the universe, that like make moms moms and dads dads and people are like teenagers. But once you mess up that, you cannot motivate someone the same way as you could motivate someone else. That's the whole definition is. continue to do it despite the consequence. You can't be hard enough on someone that makes them stop. You cannot punish them enough. It's going to make it go away. And that's our instinct, is to say, I'm going to leave, or I'm going to cut you off, or I'm going to this, or I'm going to that, and think that that's going to make them stop, because it's like, wow, they wouldn't risk losing all this. And you're not in the regular world anymore. You're in a new universe, and you got to understand like the laws of that universe and how it works.
So going back to you, I know you have somebody else on the couch, right? You're always having the conversations with them, and you're learning from them, but also helping them in their own mental health. Do you, coming from your background of your own family and addiction, do you learn things from the people that you're talking about, or does it make you like have revelations of, maybe going back to your childhood or something, like, oh, that's why, that person did this thing, or realizing more things about yourself or your family?
Not in a long time. I learned something from all of my clients. I learned all kinds of things, but it's not necessarily like stuff about my family of origin. But I'm really not even looking through it at that lens anymore. I'm literally, when I'm in a session with someone, my job is to be in the room with them and to really be focusing on what they're telling me. And yeah, I have other thoughts, but the other thoughts are about, what are they saying? Why are they saying that? Where's that coming from? What are the buttons that
Yeah.
that's pushing on? I'm just so in tune with what is going on with this person. I rarely go back to that.
Wow. Yeah. I've had, yeah, lots of conversations, even when I started the show, right? Whenever we started talking to people, never really even thought about my dad, when we started this. It was just, I don't know anything about recovery. I don't know anything about this whole world. And so we're going to go in blindly. And kind of like what you said earlier, I have that same, I may not be addicted to substances, but I'm very addicted to, whatever I attach myself to. And so I'm
Mhm.
going to go all in and do 1000%.
Mhm.
And learning it wasn't until like maybe 2 or 3 months later, and we did dozens of interviews where I'm like, wow, this is weird. This is like, and it made me think of things like from my childhood of like, finding, my dad's jacket, and like there was something in his pocket. We didn't know what it was. It was like in a Ziploc bag and stuff. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. It was probably drugs then. Yeah, he was probably,
Mhm.
and we never even knew it. We knew he was drinking a lot, and I didn't even think about the stance of being in the home of an alcoholic, until I've had all these conversations and hearing people's stories, and I'm like, because that was just life, you know what I mean? When you're
Yeah.
growing up in it, I'm sure you know this, but like, when you're growing up in it and you're in the thick of it, it's just part of life. It's not what everybody lives, but you're in just survival mode, and so you don't
Right.
really think about it too much. So as an adult, it's kind of strange to go back
Yeah.
and think about those things.
I can really relate to that, because a lot of people would say, "Well, is your family the reason why you got into the field?" And I wish I could say yes, because not only do I not have a good origin story for being in recovery, I can't even use that, because I'm like you, Ty. Like, I
Yeah,
didn't even realize it until I was already in the field
right.
that I came from addiction. Not that I didn't realize that those things were going on. I just didn't. It didn't occur to me how outside of the norm it was. It's just your normal. Like, I didn't think a thing about it. And now I'm in it looking back, I'm like, "Oh, dang," like, "Wow, I guess that was kinda bad," you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever you go to have sleepovers or whatever at a friend's house, and you realize, oh, their parents are completely different. And it's like, yeah, I remember like there being going to sleep at their house, but then I'd be afraid for them to come sleep at my house.
I
But
was
that was
actually
just
the opposite. I never went to
really
anybody else's house, because I had the cool parents. Everyone came to
okay.
my house. So so I didn't even have that perspective. I was intimidated to be at other kids' houses. Like, I felt scared and nervous to be at other
Really,
kids' houses. Yeah, because they had all these rules, and, like, I don't know, like, I just didn't grow I mean, I raised myself. We did what we wanted to do, like, so I was scared to be at other people's houses.
yeah. Well, you
Yeah,
came out all right, I think.
most of the time, I think so.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah, that's incredible. And yeah, I guess and so just learning about you, because I thought that, yeah, I could try to go to these interviews and not know much about, the person that we're talking to, because I want to learn in real time, right? That's the whole purpose of this, because people that are listening, they want to learn along with, what we're learning about. And so I don't believe in the prescripted answers, and like I said, a big believer in tacit knowledge. And so just asking the questions off the top of your mind. So it kind of blows my mind that there is, someone like yourself in this realm. And it's very encouraging that there are people who are doing this and successfully, and you're also projecting the message of like, here's what you need to know, and
Mhm.
here's what they need to know
Mhm.
whenever they are seeking recovery. Um, and yeah, it's incredible. I highly recommend that anybody, go check your channel out. We'll definitely link that in the description as well. Um, Amber, yeah, I wanted to ask you. So we always ask people at the end of the show, with accumulated with all of your experience and everything you've done, both professionally, your personal life. I mean, all experiences all around for all the time that you've had on this planet Earth. Um, what is a solution, a long-term solution that you think is something that we could sustain and is vitally important for people that are going into recovery?
I think just the belief that people can recover. I feel like we hear all those negative statistics all the time, which, first of all, I'm like, where do those even come from? And secondly, it takes they come from treatment centers trying to prove that they're effective is where it comes from. But what people don't understand is it takes most people several times, and so that skews the statistics. I see people get better from this every single day. Most of the people I see pull out of this thing
Yeah.
at every level of it. So don't fall into that trap. Don't put yourself around people that talk like that. Don't go to providers that say you're not going to make it out of this. You know, one in
Right.
10, one person in this room is going to make it. Don't listen to that. Don't.
We try to stay clear away from anything political, because that gets completely divided, you know what I mean, and like you're either extremely one side or extremely the other
Yeah.
side. I know that you come from a red state like I do, but it's so hard to stay away sometimes with those numbers like you were talking about, because sometimes from the top they'll spit out these numbers that just do not match up with reality, and it's like that's harmful for the message, you know what I mean. Yesterday, somebody at the top said that there were over 300 million deaths, drug overdose deaths last year in the US alone. The population of the United States is 340. So only 40 million of us are left. It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. And it's like, stop. If you're gonna, I understand like making a point, but like it hurts, trying to talk about recovery and say, hey, recovery is possible. And like you just said, there are so many people that are finding it, and they find it through different ways.
Yeah.
And there's so many different paths through it. And it's important to do what you're doing, which is the mental health side, but taking care of yourself medically, making sure that you're centered in your mind, building a career, you've got goals. I mean, there's so many different types of aspects that you need to think about, but people are doing it and they're doing it successfully, and they assimilate back into society, and you would never know that they ever had a problem unless they just tell you right off the hand. So yeah, it's very harmful and counterproductive whenever we hear those big numbers spouted off like that. And it happens all the way from the top, but it also all the way down to those facilities that you're talking about. And I'm sure South Carolina has this as well, but Arkansas right now, they're working on these initiatives. They've about 4 or 5 years, I think it is. But they will put these policymakers together, and they will, sit on the floor, and they will bring in people that have they're leaders of this recovery organization. These are people that are in reentry. These are people that are in recovery. And so they'll gather it all up, and they try to look for evidence-based solutions, is what they call them. Okay. And so they
Mhm.
have particular numbers that they want to
Uh-huh.
see, and then they gauge how successful is your recovery program based on that. And it's so, I think, and my own personal opinion is that it's so hard to nail down or quantify, change when you put it down to such like a basic type of
Yeah.
number that you're trying to quantify.
Yeah, what does it mean? Does it mean I never picked up a drink again? Does it mean I didn't
Right.
get arrested? Does it mean I just said whatever you wanted me to say on the survey because I answered the phone when you called? Like,
Yeah.
what the heck does it even mean? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I don't know. I'm hoping that we can find a better way to sort of, take all this data we know of and be speaking to experts like yourself and put some action to it, figure out what's working, put more resources behind it, and figure out what's not working. And, we adjust that to be sustainable for a future for a long-term recovery for people. Yeah, Amber, thank you so much again. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I really appreciate that you've jumped on here and you spoke with us and enlightened me. I'm so happy to know that your channel exists. By the way, I've already subscribed this morning, but I'm going to be consuming your madly consuming your content. Where can people find you if they want to keep up with you?
Find me right on YouTube at Put the Shovel Down. If you're a podcast listener and you're listening to this, you can find me on the regular podcast apps. I think on the regular podcast apps called Inside the Mind of an Addict. I'm primarily a YouTuber. There's a lot of it that I put on the podcast, like my live videos I do on Thursdays on there, but there's a lot of other content that's not on the podcast that's on YouTube only.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you again for sharing your expertise. And thank you for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find us on all the podcast platforms as an audio form, from iHeart to Apple to Amazon Music. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, then you can find us on YouTube. Just search for Long-Term, a podcast on recovery. If you heard Amber say something here, and I'm sure that you did, if she said something that was really impactful to you, and you know somebody that needs to hear this, the best way to help us grow this message and to reach the people that we needed to reach is, not only just subscribing. Of course, we like that. We like comments and all that, of course, but share this episode with them. Make sure that the message gets to the people that need to hear it. The worst that can happen is they won't listen to it. The best that can happen is it'll save their life. And so you never know what can happen. It puts those wheels in motion. And we just need to know that there's encouragement and the resources and people like Amber exist. There is support out there for people who need recovery. And I appreciate you for tuning into each and every episode. And we'll see you in the next one.